Welcome to the Building Doors Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Harst. And today's guest knew exactly what he wanted to do when he was just 6 years old. While most kids were dreaming about becoming astronauts or professional athletes, Nathan Klein was captivated by the voice behind the horse races. He didn't just love the sport. He fell in love with the art of calling it. Today, Nathan is the youngest full-time thoroughbred track announcer in North America. What? Serving as the Racecaller at Penn National. Before graduating from the University of Arizona's racetrack industry program, which who knew? He had already called races at tracks across the country and internationally, proving that passion, dedication, and talent can open remarkable doors. Nathan is also autistic, and he's been open about the way his brain works and how it's helped him shape his career. His story is one of pursuing a lifelong dream, embracing who you are, and showing that success doesn't have to follow someone else's expectations. Nathan, welcome to the Building Doors Podcast.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yay! So let's talk a little bit about when you started to realize that you weren't just a fan of horse racing, that you wanted to add your voice to it.
Well, it kind of started with the first horse race I ever watched. It was the 2010 Breeders' Cup races, featuring the voice of Trevor Denman, one of the most iconic horse racing announcers there are. He hailed from South Africa, and when he came to the United States in the 1980s, he completely reinvented race calling up until that point. Those kinds of things that we associate a lot with race calling, that kind of huge flowing vocabulary, especially like phrases, turns of phrase, and adding a little bit extra drama to a horse race. That was stuff that he really helped kind of push. It's not like it didn't exist before, but his voice and unique style became synonymous with West Coast racing and then worldwide horse racing. Like for any TV show from the 80s to the even 2000s, if they needed a horse racing announcer to be in the movie, it was him. He and Tom Durkin really kind of pushed the idea of using strong vocabulary and especially storytelling, in Tom Durkin's case, to really push things forward. So having Trevor Denman as a first voice, I didn't even know that a South African accent existed when I was 5 years old. So that voice immediately kind of caught my eye, or ear, I should say. I guess my eye's ear too, but hearing all of that, that was the first thing I noticed, along with the horses. So when you start imitating it as a young kid, that's the thing you try to imitate. You ended up trying to imitate the voice. Badly, but you do it. That was kind of... So, my love for horse racing and the love of the race call, they can't be separated. They've always been together.
And so because you're on a podcast that is listened to and appreciated by lots of voiceover actors, I have to ask, what was it about Trevor's voice? I'm sure the accent was part of it, but what tonalities do you try to bring from Trevor's performance into your own?
See, in terms of vocal execution, he had the biggest thing about horse racing announcing that works in your favor is the idea of, it's the colloquial term for it, flow. This was something that Pete Aiello, who calls in Florida, described it to me when he was talking about my early tapes and giving me some early pointers. The idea of flow. In terms of race calling, I think that race calling is almost one run-on sentence in terms of calling it. Of course, there are times where you take a breath, you pace yourself, but the idea of it is that you never stop talking as long as the horses are running. There is always something to mention. There is always action going on. So throughout the whole thing, Trevor Denman, without missing a beat, would always find something to mention. Typically, you'd go through the field, even if the race was 1 3/4 miles, which is over nearly 3 minutes long. It was just 3 minutes of constantly something was going on. He never made it seem boring at all. There was always something going on. He also had kind of this repertoire of fun little catchphrases that he'd always pull out that are so synonymous with him that people don't even use.
Like what?
Like, if a horse is flying on the outside really fast, he'll say something along the lines of, "He looked like he jumped in at the quarter pole. He's coming like an express train." But those phrases of his were so synonymous with him that that other announcers have kind of almost self-banned themselves from using it.
Out of respect, yeah.
yeah, they couldn't, he didn't have to put no trademark or anything. Some announcers have done that, but because they're so synonymous with him, they're like, there's no way I could do it better than him. So he basically paved his own way. And it was just like, it was just action, vocabulary, and punctuality in one great 2-minute scene every 30 minutes, 9 to 10 times a day.
So how do you prepare then to be able to speak for 3 minutes in one long run-on sentence that is a story that has highs and lows, that evokes emotion? Like, is there a lot of preparation and study that goes in prior to a race?
Ironically, no. And yes, at the same time. It's very confusing. The thing about horse racing is that 3 minutes is the super long races. The short races are typically between 1 to 1.5 minutes. But even then, there's still lots to go around. The thing about a horse race and just kind of how a horse race is set up is that my job requires me to do this every 25 to 30 minutes, 7 to 9 times a day, at least in Penn National's case. Other tracks you can do as much as 14. But because there is not, now some people will say that there's too much time between races. I disagree, because there's only so much practice that you can do before a race if you have to do the same task multiple different times. So really a lot of it is on the ground action for me. So you finish a race, for example, you get through all that. On the board, it'll tell you how much time is left. And during that time, you can read over the form, you can read over the facts of the horse, but you're doing it right then and there. Of course, you want to get yourself in the know in the days beforehand, but really, I think there's only so many races you can keep in your mind at once. So, going one race at a time, sucking it all in the minutes ahead of time, and then immediately forgetting is actually the greatest power, to immediately forget. That after you've called, let's say, 8 horses that you spent the last 15, 20 minutes memorizing, repeating over and over again until you're sick of it, looking with your binoculars, that immediately after it's done, you just forget. You just forget about them. Like, sometimes I'll be 2 races down, and I don't even remember half the field from that race 2 races ago, because now we're focusing on race 3. But the ability to immediately drop that information in order to focus on what's immediately relevant is a very secretly important part of preparation for it. And also, I guess, finding the ways to quickly suck it up for you. The big thing I do is coloring, and that's something a lot of announcers do. I have a giant cup of colored markers and pencils. And with these markers on the program, I'll color the jockey silks, those giant uniforms that the jockeys wear. They're really bright and colorful, but also they're actually more visible than the horses. It's easy for a horse to go in behind another horse, and then you can't see them. But what's sticking up in the air? Well, the jockey, because they're standing on their tiptoes, holding onto the horse. So when you see these bright uniforms, those are the things that you're actually memorizing. But it does also help to memorize the horse a little bit too, because if a horse has something that you find interesting, like I'll write down if a horse is a gray. But the underlying theme of all these random things, markers, horse colors, jockey colors, names even, is that it works for me and me alone. And every announcer has done something different. Some announcers don't color at all. They'll just go straight for the head and just memorize the names and just go from there. And other announcers make full-blown flashcards. And they'll just pull them out, and then it'll show the jockey color, and they'll be like, you, me. So that's what Larry Colmus does, and he's the voice of the Derby and the Preakness. But it's all about finding personal adaptation to be able to so quickly go from one race to another and then just throw it all out and then do it again.
Nathan, there are so many parallels to being a voiceover actor and what you just stated in your process. And I'll share them with you now. So as a voice actor, you audition for all different kinds of products and services and companies, right? There's no way you could possibly know the ins and outs of every single one. So if you get an audition, let's say for a horse product or, some sort of product that would clean a horse's hooves, right? You may go and do a quick Google search and see if they have a YouTube channel. You may see, the visuals, if they've used other voice actors, what kind of voices did they use? And then you'll practice your script, you'll record it, you'll send it out. And the key to having good mental health and voice acting is to forget it. because it takes a good voice actor will probably audition 45 to 55 times before they book. So that's a lot of auditions, right? That's a lot of races to call, if we want to use that parallel, before they book a job. So it's just better just to forget it. Just let it go. And so there's so much about what you do and what voice actors do that is similar, especially when it comes to the mentality of approaching the gig or the race.
So funny you mentioned voice acting because I was a theater kid, and one thing about being a theater kid is that that's not unique to me being a race caller at all, because another famous race caller, Tom Durkin, who was the voice of the East, Trevor Denman, the voice of the West, is that while he was mixing race calling and wanting to be a race caller, he was also a stage actor. And even though he's now retired at Saratoga, when he's not going to the Saratoga races, he also acts in Saratoga stage plays all the time. Now that's just one thing, that's stage acting. But also, yeah, like, he would do a lot of voiceover work for, like, stallion ads and all that. You do whatever you can to kind of fulfill those things. Heck, even though it's definitely not as nearly as consistent as the, voiceover work you've done, people have already kind of pulled me into doing voice stuff. Like, when I went to college at RTIP, they were like, can you do the voice for our symposium commercial? And they let me do that for the last 2 years. Heck, one of them is actually airing right now on horse racing channels.
Yay, that's awesome!
Yeah, and I loved every bit of it. Like, even though my thing is being a race caller, I really do love the art of voice acting, because at the end of the day, I feel like you're half sports announcer and half voice actor to some extent.
100% agree with you, because you're telling that story and you're getting people involved and committed and calling upon their emotions. It's exactly what we do as voice actors.
Exactly. The only difference is I'm not playing a character. The only character that I would be playing in horse racing as the announcer is Big Brother. Because I watch over all, and I have to tell everyone who is watching what is going on, because I'm also the messenger. Yeah, like, there's definitely a lot of camaraderie in that.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, theater was my thing for middle school to high school, and that was kind of my first taste of voice control training, even, to some extent. Ironically, one of the current ways that, like, my voice has been practiced is going to the karaoke bar.
What's your go-to karaoke song? What is your go-to karaoke song?
Well, the one that put me on the map was Uptown Funk, which I kid you not, I've won $150 singing that song at a karaoke contest. It's unbelievable. But the only reason I bring that up is because I noticed, because I did it week in and week out, that actually my voice got, like, actually stronger. That I could do better high notes than I did before. Now, I'm no formally trained singer at all, but I just noticed that it felt like my voice was going to the gym.
That's right. It is. We do vocal workouts all the time. I have a question. Have you ever met any of your idols? Have you ever met any of the horse calling idols that you've talked about?
If we're talking horse racing idols, yeah, a lot of here's the thing about horse race is that it is so niche. It is so esoteric, and because of that, it is not that hard to happen to be only 1 or 2 degrees from a lot of the most important people in it. Like, okay, like, here's a quick example. Katie Davis, the person that you had earlier.
Yes.
Spectacular.
Amazing.
Yeah. Like, we follow each other on Twitter, and it wasn't even that hard. Like, that's just kind of because of how tight that circle is. And then, like, the Racing Symposium, which I did which I attended, used as a student, because students get in for free, as a tool, and did voiceover for. She went to that event, and we met. Like, that's how kind of quick it can be. Tom Durkin I've met a few times, and even most recently I met him in June, during the closing day of Aqueduct, and that was and it was kind of fun to see that again. He actually first met me when he does a museum tour at the National Racing Hall of Fame in Saratoga as a tour guide, and I first saw that when I was 15. And one thing that happened during that talk was that he was kind of the first person to kind of recommend, like, if you're going to do racing, do theater and go to college.
That's so smart.
Exactly. But at the time, I actually didn't want to go to college. Um,
Oh.
so he was kind of the first person to really kind of that I'd listen to.
Mm.
Because you don't listen to your parents when you're 15.
No, no.
No, you don't. So that led to me going to RTIP when that was discovered, and kind of got the ball rolling to today. But that's kind of a perfect kind of streamlined timeline example. But almost every announcer that I grew up listening to, like the current voice of the Kentucky Derby, Larry Colmus, the voice of Churchill Downs, and and the actual on-track announcer. There's two announcers for Kentucky Derby, Travis Stone. Almost every big announcer I've had the pleasure of either running into or even getting good luck, getting wished good luck
Mm.
from. Um,
Yes.
it's remarkable how almost easy it is to meet so many different people in horse racing. And if you play your cards right, they then become your friends.
Yes, Nathan. Let's talk about your superpower. Let's talk about autism.
Sure.
And how has that been a strength in developing your career path?
I think the most important part of me happening to have such a thing is the fact that I even chose this in the first place. This is not a normal thing that people do. This is not what most people grow up wanting to be. It's sure like when I went to school in the North Carolina education system, none of the graduating class of my graduating class of like 400 people had any desire to be anywhere near the racing industry. And that's kind of underselling it just how kind of solo that journey was. But it was all about kind of finding that location, finding your place. And it really got sold home senior year of college because Temple Grandin spoke at U of A. And while she was there, she went over all the different kinds of minds, which she made a whole book about. I can't remember it perfectly, but basically she said that there are three different types of thinking minds, and the world unfairly focuses on one. And by
Mm.
harnessing it and being able to focus on the three kinds of minds, you can get all these different kinds of workers. She also talked about how unfair sometimes being forced to learn a lot of math is when it's not necessary for certain skills, and it really alienates people who have the potential to be really good at specific niches. All of this to say is that when I asked her a certain question and I mentioned wanting to be a race caller, she really kind of nailed the point home of find your thing, find your niche. For her, it was agriculture and cows. That's what worked for her and her alone. Race calling worked for me and me alone. Um, having the ability to be so specific, I think is tied to happening to have such a thing as autism. That I ever wanted to be so interested in something like this.
I love that answer, Nathan. And I love that you've actually interacted with Temple and actually had a chance to ask her a question and interact. And it goes to show, I think, that when people, no matter what it is, whether it's you're on the spectrum or whether you are disabled or whether you, whatever it is, whatever challenge you've had in life, when you share it, it becomes easier for other people then to share their stories and to learn from you and to then go on and do great things without this hampered feeling of, oh, I have been diagnosed with XYZ, or I have this disability, or I have this. It's really just a way of figuring out how to navigate something that maybe wasn't built necessarily for you, but should have been in the first place, right?
Yeah, like that was the big thing in my world, is that like if you could believe it, despite my profession and the thing that you literally have me on here for, I was later to talk than most toddlers. It took me longer to say my first words than the average toddler. And definitely the biggest one was I was falling behind in education when I was very young. So all my educational life, there was a bit of game of catch up that was going on. So kind of finding those things that make you want to keep moving forward. Like I mentioned before, I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to be done with high school because I did not like school. I don't think a lot of people did. But as I kept finding the desire, something like RTIP, working towards that goal and then actually hitting it, I actually started to like school. And then you realize that, maybe you didn't hate school, you just didn't find what you wanted to actually learn. And some people never learn that, and that's the saddest part, that they don't find that thing that makes them want to chase.
What advice would you give to parents of kids on the spectrum whose interests seem too specific or unconventional? Like there's no way they could make a living, or there's no way they could earn money from doing this passion that they have. Not even necessarily passion, but just this finite focus.
I think the big thing is just to listen. Everyone kind of has their own thing, and I think kind of, depending on what that thing is, I think there are a lot of ways that you can make money that people just don't even realize. I mean, who would have thought that, like, this apartment is paid for by yelling at horses all day? As an example, even though none of my family ever worked in horse racing a bit, despite the fact that horse racing is usually started by having a family member in it, as another thing. But I think the biggest thing is listening. The greatest thing that you can do as a parent is just to listen. You don't have to understand everything that your kid is interested in, because, yeah, some of it only makes sense to them. My parents sure as hell don't know everything about racing just because I tell them about it. A lot of it still doesn't necessarily make sense to them. But I think the idea of just listening and feeling like someone actually likes that you like something is one of those things that will keep you going for a long time and make you feel a lot less alone. And in terms of, I guess, finding that career, I think the biggest thing is to just be creative and kind of balance those things out. If someone is truly interested in something that doesn't really have any kind of financial potential, like just being a movie watcher, or something, some specific hobby, I think then your focus should be creating a life where they can balance out their personal interests with ways to help fund those personal interests, in a way that's kind of suitable. But I think just finding that balance and realizing that your kid is an individual. So what worked for the one person may not work for the other. Even my life does not work for everyone else. It only works because I chose it.
And have you ever come across a situation or a person that put you in a box because of your diagnosis and didn't allow you to succeed, or said, oh, well, because he's on the spectrum, he can only do X, Y, and Z. It's too much to do ABC.
I think, honestly, most of that kind of classic stuff that happens occurred in my educational life. In one specific example, and I love this story, in kindergarten, I was actually being considered to repeat it. They were going to hold me back. And I was going to repeat kindergarten. And the person who stepped in to say no was my principal, of all people. This was something I found out many years later, but I was not happy in kindergarten. I was upset and I didn't know how to express it for a lot of different reasons. But the principal knew that even though I acted out, I was also smart. Which not everyone kind of immediately put together. So when that suggestion was brought, they spoke out and said, that is a terrible idea. And the reason why they thought it was a terrible idea to repeat it just because I found things harder was the fact that, in her own words, that I imitate what's around me. If I'm imitating kindergartners for another year, I'm still going to be a kindergartner. But if you put me in a class of first graders next year, I'll start imitating and following with the first graders. And that became kind of a running theme throughout my life, was that the reason I had the opportunities to succeed was that people were not afraid to make things harder for me, in an ironic twist. Because it would have been easier, logically, to have me repeat kindergarten. But I wouldn't have grown. But by going to first grade, I then grew. But there were people who wanted to pigeonhole me in that sense, that thought I couldn't handle it, in that specific example. I think the big thing is that people don't really necessarily think autism, they think me. And they don't know the word for it. I work in a very old industry, so the amount of times people actually bring up the word autism is almost zero. And mental health also as a concept in racing is very new. I don't know if Katie had talked about it, but even like jockey mental health is considered a very new thing that she's preaching about. And the reason I bring that all up is that because mental health is kind of such a new thing, the word autism is almost never brought up. Even though I really think that there's probably quite a few people in racing that never had it, or that never had it diagnosed, but have to live with it. And I guess the last part of like pigeonholing is, yeah, every once in a while I'll have a person who's supposed to help me and they just don't understand me, and it'll lead to kind of a rocky relationship where they don't trust me to do anything, and because of that, I never grow. So it's just like, okay, we're just stuck here. But I wouldn't say I got any opposition necessarily for being autistic. I guess the closest thing for it is every once in a while you can kind of tell when someone thinks of you as a bit of a baby and kind of infantilizes you a little bit. But that's more in the social life.
Okay.
That people my age will kind of see me more as a kid, even though I'm literally the same age as you. But that's like small stuff in the sense that it's very subtle, and sometimes I even think I'm crazy for even thinking it. But I know I'm right.
That's right. I know I'm right.
Yeah.
I know I'm right.
Yeah, so it's like I never got like no, it's not like how the movies are where they'll say the words flat out like he's autistic, he can't do this thing. That's not how it's micro stuff. It's the small things that people do. But I think a lot of people don't even in racing don't necessarily have the words for it because they have something else they want to focus on and they put their life into.
So I have one last question before we go. If you could call any race in the world, which one would it be and why?
The Kentucky Derby. America's biggest horse race. That's the one that every American race caller wants. But, like, there are a lot of amazing races all over the world. I sure as heck wouldn't mind, in my free time, going to call races in different countries. That's a personal aspiration of mine. And even through my following, I've befriended people from different countries who enjoy my work. Like, Indonesia is surprisingly fond of me, if you could believe it.
That's awesome.
And they'll even, have every once in a while ask me to call a race of theirs that was originally in Indonesian. So the idea of kind of traveling the world and use it in race calling as an opportunity to do that is something that I wouldn't mind at all. Hell, if I was able to find some random voice acting gigs on the side, I'm not privy. There was one recent thing we did for a commercial where they have a superhero mascot for the racetrack, the Wager Warrior, and they're gambling on 2 concession lines and which one will finish faster. So in the commercial, I call the concession line.
I saw it. It's on your Instagram, I believe.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, I want to do more of that and kind of use and maximize the creative potential of the voice.
I love it, Nathan. Thank you so much for joining us on the Building Doors podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I loved learning more about the parallels of horse racing and voiceover. And I have a sneaky suspicion that I'm going to hear you someday on the Kentucky Derby. I think that's going to happen for you.
We'll see. There's a lot that goes into it, but I sure will fight like hell to work my way up there someday.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Nathan. And thank you to all who are listening and watching. And until next time, let's keep on building some more doors. Bye-bye.